Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Morning Haze. I am Josh Hayes, and today I am joined by the wonderful and fantastic author, Amy Duboff. Welcome, Amy, to The Morning Haze. I I hadn't been doing. I've only done one this week, and I meant to do. I meant to just cut it off and just do Monday, but when all this shenanigans happened, I really wanted to talk, and I reached out to several people to get them on it. Rhett's going to come on Monday and talk about his nomination,
Nice.
and Richard is going to come on next Friday and talk about his nomination, and reaching out to the other authors as well over this whole thing. But this morning, Hayes is specifically dedicated to talking about your book and your nomination for the Nebula Award, which I think is awesome. It's
Thank you.
cool, and all my heartfelt congratulations for that nomination. That's really cool.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I am only the second indie author to ever be nominated for a novel-length work for the Nebulas, as far as I know. People can fact-check that if they want to, but I know that Catherine Valente was for a work that then went on to be traditionally published later, but at the time that she won the Norton, it was just an online publication, to the best of my knowledge. So that's
an,
a really
an
cool
incredible
thing.
I was gonna say, just an incredible achievement. I mean, wow. Like, that's so cool that you were able to do that. And um there's some drama involved, as always, with things like this. And I think it's gotten a lot of a little out of hand. And a lot
Mhm.
of people have kind of gone to the mattresses, as it were, to voice their opinion. And we can talk a little bit about that. But first, let's talk about your book.
Okay.
It's the A Light in the Dark. It's a YA book.
Mhm.
You wrote it under your pen name, A.K. Duboff.
Yes.
So let's talk about it. What is it about?
So this is actually the second book in a trilogy. So I do have a recap of book one in there so you could jump in directly to book two if you wanted. But I would of course recommend reading the first one for some context. So the general premise of this series is that there's this crystalline network that connects all of the worlds. And this is essentially a hyperspace connection to a higher dimensional storage unit. So consciousness is kind of at one level, and the physical reality is, of course, down in space time. This crystalline network allows all of the space time data to essentially be stored and uploaded to a higher dimensional plane, which then allows full universal resets. So you essentially can't get a do-over. If there's a horrible accident, a bunch of people die, they can then just do a reset to a previous configuration. But because consciousness is at a separate plane, that then just resyncs with the body. So you remember that there is a reset. So I was inspired by this general
Interesting.
concept, by the idea of playing RPG video games. So it's sort of almost a quasi gamelit, but not, because I don't really have that component, but it was inspired by games. Um, with that idea where you go into a boss battle, things start to go really badly. You realize what you should have done from the beginning, so you decided to reset and start the entire engagement over from your last save point. So I thought if that could be scaled up to an actual universal scale, like what that would entail. So the way that the crystalline network is set up in the series, it uh, there are crystals for individual zones, much like you would encounter different save points in a game. And those can be either on a local level or they can be synchronized, so you can do a planetary scale. There's this idea of, well, maybe we can do a full universal reset where everything would go, and what that would be. So that's one of the concepts that's explored in the later books.
Wow. So the first question that pops into my mind is, how does this concept function as, like, okay, so say I cross the road and I get hit by a bus, and I'm like, I don't want to get hit by that bus, so I'm going to reset. Can I just do it and it just affect me? Like, how does it, if I wanted to do it, how does that affect the rest of the world?
It would affect all matter within whatever zone. So the crystal zone would have a boundary on it, and people would just know where those boundaries were. So you could just reset within that zone, but anything that was in there would be affected. So say you had you had a log and you carved that log into a shape. If you reset, it would then go back to being a log afterward. But people would remember the thing that they made, and so it'd be annoying. So they have a central world that they just say there's not going to be any resets here. So they have servers on there. So any digital information is backed up there in the cloud. So all of that. So I realized I didn't actually answer your question about what the book is. That's just the premise of the world.
Sure. No, that's cool. I like it.
The actual plot and story is that so Elle is the main character, and she and her friends are they've just graduated high school and are just kind of having their last summer of fun before they go off to college. And a few years back, they discovered this idea, well, hey, if we jump off a cliff, we can sort of fly and then just do a reset right before we hit the bottom. And then the thrill of that, then we're totally fine. So they're out playing up on the cliffs and just jumping off and having a good old time when they discover that there's this dark cloud that's appeared in the Kangen crystal. And what the heck is this? We've never seen this before. But it's kind of at the end of the day, so they go back home, and then while they're out having dinner, they get a summons to the main square where the mayor tells them that we're going to do a full planetary reset and go back much further than they've ever done for a reset before. So they know that something's really up, but before they can tell anyone about this cloud that they saw, the reset happens. Rather than waking up where she should, Elle instead appears on a spaceship, and the governing hegemony has come in and extracted her consciousness, and she's been downloaded into a new enhanced body that was essentially to the specifications of what her consciousness would ideally have wanted her shape to be. So like she had dyed hair before, but instead her hair is actually fuchsia now because that's what she always has envisioned for herself. So he and several other people who've been extracted have and now have enhanced abilities and have been tasked with going and stopping this darkness, because all of them had come in contact with an infected crystal beforehand, so that gave them a certain measure of resistance to it. So they go off, and their first task is to seal the Master Archive, which is essentially the central crystal backup for everything, which would just preserve everything, keep it from, even if the darkness were to reach it, it would at least keep it preserved and not tainted, so they could eventually go and do another reset. But ultimately go figure out what this darkness is and stop it.
The concept and then the plot are just so like high concept.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like I'm intrigued by the book on multiple levels, because the reset idea is very unique in that there's one other author that has done it, but not in the way that you did it, and not in a very, it didn't happen until the end of the series, and that was Peter F. Hamilton in the Dreaming Void series, the trilogy. At the end of that series, the main character kind of comes into all his powers as he's growing through the series, and then resets everything at the end, which I thought was interesting. But it's interesting, like the whole jumping off a cliff and then resetting before that. I mean, that's ingenious, right? Like, who wouldn't want to try to do that for, it just sounds like fun.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it was based on a game, and then it had some game elements to it. Is that how you went about, like, how long did it take you to design this world? Because it sounds like super complex.
Yeah, it was really complex. So, I was initially inspired by the general idea from playing Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts and Xenogears and some of those classic RPGs.
Sure.
So that was the premise. So I guess the party structure that I have for the characters there. So you have, so Elle is kind of the fighter. She uses a sword, and then Caden is a magic caster, and then Maris is also a magic caster on the healing side, and then Torin is kind of the tank person.
Nice.
So I definitely wanted to capture that element of it. But in terms of the mechanics, I had the general idea of it, and so I just started writing and let some of it flow organically. And then by the time I was done with book one, which didn't really get into the mechanics, so I had groundwork that I laid there, but I don't really explain the mechanics, and that gets developed throughout the entire series. So it's really not until toward the end of book 3 that they actually figure out how the universe works. Because the entire story is in first person, so Elle doesn't actually know. It's kind of like we go through life and we don't really understand the math behind the physics of how something drops, but if you study it deeply, eventually you can get there, but you take the world for granted. It's just the world that they live in. So they go through the process of learning how the universe works and discovering all sorts of things. So by the end of it, the magic is hard scienced by the end of book 3. So it starts out feeling very much like a space fantasy, but the entire series is actually borderline hard SF. I'm not going to call it hard SF because there's a lot that's hand-woven in there, but the magic system and the reset mechanism is completely explained by the end of book 3. And I have to credit Jim Dean as being my developmental editor. He is a beta reader who became a very good friend and close working colleague on this, and really helped bring the science element to it. So kudos to him for sticking with me and going through all of the tough discussions to make this a reality.
Well, kind of you kind of, it's almost a requirement to kind of do a high concept story like that, where it's not just a straight A to B, but there's a lot of back and forth that can happen in the book that will affect the plot and then the world on a grand scale. So you really kind of need to have that, all the intricacies of the story kind of nailed down, so you know exactly what's happening.
Yeah, there are a lot of moving pieces in it. I'm really pleased with how it came together. I'm incredibly proud of the series, and I was torn between should I push A Light in the Dark or Masters of Fate, which is the book 3. I decided to go for A Light in the Dark just so there would be a lower barrier to entry of not having as much character backstory in there, since it's the middle. But if you really, if you enjoy book 2 at all, I highly recommend reading the third one and getting the rest of the picture in there.
So it is YA, and you've written other science fiction stories, some middle sci-fi, some space opera. What was it about this story that you felt was best told through the perspective of a YA setup?
Well, I do think that the book can be enjoyed by people of all ages, so don't let the YA thing turn you off. But I very much wanted this to be a story of self-discovery, and I think that theme fits very well with YA versus a more adult audience where someone knows themselves. A lot of the journey is Elle coming into her own, and she doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life, and then she has these new abilities that she's given, and she has this whole other opportunity opened up to her. So being able to grow into her own while she's growing into understanding this larger world beyond this kind of backwater planet where she grew up, I just felt that a YA orientation really fit that kind of story and theme.
Yeah. Well, I think why, like you said, you can read it as an adult or as a young person, and there are some YA that I think it's kind of a bad rap. But like Harry Potter, that whole series is one of my favorite series to read and to watch the movies. So I mean, YA definitely has a wide spectrum that. I mean, it's classified that because of the characters, but I think anybody can enjoy any type of book.
Yeah, I would definitely consider this. It's not young kid YA, but definitely more of that kind of mid to late teens. The themes of leaving home and starting to come into one's own versus the like dealing with high school antics.
Right, right. So we fast forward, and your book gets nominated for a Nebula,
Yeah.
The Andre Norton Award specifically. So tell us kind of your emotions and what happened. I mean, you get a message from somebody that says, "Hey, you're nominated." What goes through your mind then?
It I knew that the book had been getting a lot of support in the indie community going into it. So I was tentatively optimistic that it would be able to make the ballot. And I was absolutely thrilled when it did. I mean, just the opportunity to be the first person in a decade to be on the ballot for a novel length work is really special, and I am incredibly excited and happy for that. And I am so thankful to the entire community and all the support that I've received on it. And it's pretty overwhelming. I'm currently living over in the UK, so I hadn't been planning to go to the Nebula's conference because it's all the way in LA. But as soon as I got notice that I was a finalist, like, well, guess I'm going to LA. I'm also doing a conference in Atlanta 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks before that. So it'll be 2 long haul international transatlantic flights.
Oh man.
Pretty close together, but I think it'll be totally worth it to go and get to have the full experience with everyone.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. I know that I can't imagine doing 2 flights like that back to back. I know after we got done with 20 Books to Vegas last year, there was a lot of people that I knew that had to make the flight back to England, and it ruined them for several days just because of the
Yeah,
time change and all that stuff. Yeah, you end up walking around like a zombie for a
yeah.
week, not really knowing what's going on.
I'm going to be a pro by the end of this.
You know what's great is that so many people have jumped on to support you and support the other people that have been nominated, which I think is great. And congratulations to everybody on the list. But there has been some negative kind of controversy that kicked up and spun up almost immediately,
Mm-hmm.
and um, at the expense of really nothing. I mean, it my opinion is, it's like your mom used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? Like you can be gracious and still kind of have your feelings, but the kind of veracity that people took to Twitter and to blogs and to wherever their platform was to decry some of these nominations was just kind of ridiculous to me and just way over the top.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts initially when you started seeing all that? Because I mean, a lot of posts were directed at indies in general, and there were some posts that were directed at indies, but then also supported you. Just very curious on what your thoughts were when you saw all that happening.
Yeah, I was very sad to see things blow up as quickly and as strongly as they did. I wish that. So I have friends on both sides of it. So that was a very awkward position to be in, admittedly, of understanding both of their perspectives and just really trying to conduct myself in a way that would both stand up for myself, but also not be antagonistic, because that was the last thing I wanted to do.
Sure.
Um, so I wish that the concerns about the or reading list, whatever people want to call it, had been brought up in a calmer fashion. And if this is really a SIFWA issue, it should not have turned into a public spectacle the way that it did. I wish that
Absolutely.
had been brought up on the private forums, brought to the board, anyone else who was in the position of being able to do something about it and have a discussion. I don't think that turning to a highly public forum and profanity-filled rants was a way that reflected well on the organization or the individuals involved. I personally made some statements. I was somewhat attacked for them. I don't think that I said anything that was out of line, and I stand by my statements. I was moving the week that the infamous post was being edited and the asterisks were added and all of that. So it wasn't until kind of after the fact that I realized the extent of what that original reading list, which was put up with the best intentions, had turned into.
Right.
So I was shocked to kind of find out exactly what had become of everything. I know that there were only good intentions behind it, and I know the support that I had regardless of the list. So I'm very confident in my work and my own place there. I just hope that people don't look at this as a long-term issue. I really would like to see that trad versus indie mentality go away completely. We're all authors. I would like all of us to be able to come to the table as authors and not be looking at people as the publisher that they do or do not have behind them.
100%. 100% agree. That what's crazy is that I saw some threads on Twitter that were basically, and I'm paraphrasing, so basically saying we let them into SIFWA, them being indie authors.
Mhm.
And for a little bit of context for people that maybe don't understand what's happening or what with the Nebula, and maybe we should have led with this is the Nebulas are the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. It's their awards. It's their yearly award thing, and SIFWA members can nominate books that they deem worthy to win this award. And what happened was that there was a recommended reading list, if you will, posted on a very big indie Facebook page. Then the Nebulas came out, and from what I could tell, and I don't know all the authors, but from what I could tell, 5 indies were on the list, just 5. And a couple of them were in the short story one category. At least 2 or 1 was in the novella. I'm not sure if I think
There were
Brazi
2 short stories, 1 novelette, 1 novella, and then my novel in
and
the
then
north.
yours, right. And so because of that, everybody looked at this post that was made in this Facebook group and basically said the only way that those indies managed to get on the list was because of this post that was made in this group. And it's basically what they're saying, that
Mhm.
they're saying that these stories are not good enough to have made it on their own if this list hadn't been posted in this Facebook group.
Mhm.
And it was just a back and forth of, we let you in, you should know your place. Um, we need to change the rules so this can't happen again. Just ridiculous and crazy things that were happening. And instead of just being happy that people got nominated, what I think is interesting, we talked about a little bit in the post show, is that Tor completely dominated the nominations, and nobody. And what's interesting is you go on, I don't know whose website it was. I think Tor published a list, and in the
Mhm.
comments of that post, somebody actually went on there and said, "I didn't see some of these stories in the recommended reading list that you guys posted on your website." Right. So then they were like, "What's something's fishy going on?" So basically, they're saying there is another recommended reading list somewhere else. I'm not sure where it is because I didn't research it that much. But
Mhm.
that list was okay. That recommended reading list was okay. But the one that was happening in this Facebook group is not. And the one that
Yeah.
happened in this Facebook group completely ruined the awards, and that we should change how we do things, which I think was just ridiculous and over the top and unnecessary at all.
Yeah.
I'm personal friends with a couple of the nominees rather, and I know that every one of those writers did nothing except go about like what you would normally do, what someone would reasonably do. Nobody went behind nobody cheated the system. Nobody created these grand scheme of let's game the nebulas, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
so it's very
absolutely.
disheartening to me.
Yeah. And I wish what people would see is all of the networking that happens within the indie community outside of that.
Right,
So the 20 books group is close to 30,000 people now. And that's not all of the indies. There are plenty of indies that are not in there, but a really good portion of the indie population is in there or connected to it in some way.
right.
And I personally go to the 20 Books conference because that is where the majority of the top indie sci-fi authors, specifically space opera, my genre, they all attend that. So that's the one time where I can go hang out with my friends and my close
Yeah.
peers. They're the people I do newsletter swaps with and bounce ideas off when I have a new book series coming out. That is the most important networking for me. So there's the professional side of getting publisher, but then there's the indie marketing, and they're really different animals. And so that's an important venue to be able to go do that. So
Absolutely.
so I'm connected to that group for that reason. And I know that there were no ill intentions. We had all been talking about our books, both back in November when we were at the conference leading up to that. I mean, the first book in my series came out in, it was May or June. I can't recall exactly when it launched, but that was in a box set. So there were a bunch of authors that were involved in launching that box set. So I mean, so this work has been known for a long time, and people are only looking at this list that showed up a few months before the votes happened, but they're not paying attention to that entire backstory and
Right.
understanding that the community, because of how we have to market our work, we read each other's work because that's what we write, and we want to, like, hey, this really resonated with fans, so let's see what that person did, and be able to bring some of those ideas into our own work, make ourselves better writers. So I think that's where the indie versus trad thing is coming in, because it can be a little bit cliquish in that regard, like what are publishers looking for versus what our readers are looking for. But that doesn't mean that the work that we're creating is one of them is more valid than the other. They're just different styles of
Absolutely.
writing. And I would really love to see an appreciation for good writing is good writing. It might not be the style that you're used to or that you typically read yourself, but that doesn't mean that that isn't good for what it is. I mean, it's like
Right.
trying to compare a horror book versus an epic fantasy versus a
Right.
psychological sci-fi. I mean, they're all very, very different styles, and each of them is completely valid for what it is. So
Well,
just the different things.
I mean, absolutely. You mentioned that we read indies, but I really wish that we could, as authors, just get away from indie, trad, new pub, or whatever, and just call it what it is writing stories that people want to
Sure.
read. Because I mean, yeah, indies read other indies books because we like what they're reading. We like those stories. We like reading what our friends have done and talking about it with them. But it's not like that the people in the traditional space don't do the same thing. Like I've listened to several podcasts that are run by traditional authors, and they are always talking about reading each other's books. And so it's not anything that is just confined to indies, like, oh, we don't read any traditional published, but it's the labeling and the category based, like your work is not good because it's not here, but
Yeah.
you can still make a living on it. Like I still buy my gas for my car and my food and all that. Like I it's the same money. Like so I wish that we could get away from those labels and just appreciate what we are all doing as storytelling and art in its own right, and whether or not it's your taste. And I mean, there's plenty of indie books that I don't like. I mean, the same way that there's plenty of traditional books that I don't like.
Yeah.
It's um so I'm gonna look over here in the live chat and just scroll through and
Sure.
see if we have any questions, because there's been a lot of things going on over here that I haven't been paying attention to. We should mention though too, and I don't know if it's something that you want to speak on, but this morning, just right before we broadcast, the person that wrote that post, his name's Jonathan Braze. He's a retired Marine. He's a fantastic author. I don't know that he's on the board. Is he on the board now? Or is he? I know that he's part of SIFWA, but I don't know if he's on the board.
I think he is just a very engaged member. I do not believe he's in an official capacity.
Right. So he has withdrawn his nomination from the Nebulas. So, you know, I have mixed feelings about that. I understand why he did it. I wish that he would not have caved to the animosity and just the attacks that were out there, because in my opinion, that just kind of enables more people to do that same kind of attack on people, which I think is ridiculous. I understand why he did it, but it's kind of sad at the same time.
Yeah, I don't like the. I know that there are arguments from both sides. I don't like that it sets a precedent for, if we're loud and scream enough, then someone will do what we want.
Right.
Um, with that said, I do think that this went on for a long enough time that something needed to be said for it to have some chance of being resolved in a relatively amicable manner without getting even more heated. So just the very fact that he would be willing to do that without question, without anyone asking to, is a true testament to his integrity and character. And I hope that no one looks down on him in any way. I know that he has my support and the support of everyone else who is involved in this. And I really commend him for handling himself in that professional manner and owning a situation that got out of control. I wish that this had that maybe an apology had been issued immediately after this whole thing came out to kind of get ahead of things rather than in there. I'm disappointed that the civil board has remained silent for as long as they have. I've been hearing that they're working on a statement in response, but I'm not sure.
It's been sent out to the membership. I got it actually just before we went live. I'm not sure if it's available publicly, but I did get it through email. It's a statement. You know, it is what it is. You can't expect too much either direction, but it is a statement. And you know, I want to applaud you and also Jonathan and all the other people that were affected by this. That regardless of how crazy the attacks were and how just completely like attacking someone personally, um, is beyond ridiculous in my book. But nobody that I could see that I saw um, reacted and counterattacked and went after uh, the other authors in the same way that they felt that they needed to attack these indie authors, which says a lot more about you than it does about them. And I hope that this does not. I mean, there already is kind of a gap between indie and traditional in certain circles, not for everyone, but in certain circles there are. And I hope that this does not widen that gap or push more people either direction. Because, like I said, I think that the distinction between indie and traditional is kind of dumb in my opinion, and readers don't care. Like,
No.
if you look, readers do not care if your book is indie or traditional. They look at Amazon and they see a nice cover and a good blurb, and they're going to buy it. They don't scroll down to go, is this published by Bain or Tor, Josh Hayes Press? So we're definitely not going to read that book because that's obviously not any good, right? So I hope that everybody can take just a little bit from this situation and learn from it and go forward and hell, just be nicer to each other for shit's sake. I mean, we're all in this together, right?
Well, for better or for worse, all of us are going to be forced to be in a room together.
Oh man.
So, I mean, I know that I myself will be as courteous and professional as I possibly can. I have nothing but the utmost respect for the other finalists and all of the people who have represented indie people on our publishing side and all of the professional trad people who have been involved with the awards before. And I really hope that we can just show up and show them we're people, we're authors, we love our craft, we really enjoy this, we want to please readers, and we're going to be a part of this community, so let's find a way to work together.
Absolutely. Well, Amy, thanks so much for coming on and hanging out with me and talking about it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Are you going to Vegas this year for 29?
I'm planning to anyway. I don't. It would take a lot to keep me from showing up. I have my hotel reserved. I'm planning on registering moment it opens. So yeah, I will be there.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, everybody that came and hung out this morning in the live chat, thank you guys. If I didn't see your question, I apologize. Send me a message on Facebook if you will. Just leave a comment in the video, and if it's directed at Amy, I'll make sure that we get a hold of her and get it answered and go from there. But Amy, once again, congratulations on the nomination. The best of luck to you. Regardless of how the outcome is, I think it's a really, really phenomenal thing that happened, and that you were able to now put on their Nebula Nominated thing. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone has direct questions for me as well, feel free to reach out. I have a contact form on my website, or you can find me on Facebook or any other social media. I mean, hopefully not tagging me in really mean posts.
Yes, don't do that. But do go buy your book. A light in the dark is the second book in the Dark Stars trilogy. Go and buy it, and then leave a review on Amazon, because that's awesome. So all right. Well, thanks guys for watching, and we will see you next time on Keystroke Medium. Bye.